So like you said, without that initial rainfalls and that dry spring that we had early on, a lot of our residual products, like you're saying, didn't activate. And that we kind of need to take a step back whenever we're thinking about water solubility with our pre's, because in those situations when we're limited on the rainfall that we're getting, some of the different group 15s are a little more water soluble than others. Some of the PPO products take a little bit more water to activate. So in these cases, those are products that are really, really good on keeping water hemp down, keeping our problem grasses down. But in situations where it's really dry early on, we don't get that early activation. What I found was really helpful this year is if we're taking dicamba, I was taking 22 ounces of Extendamax and adding that in with those pre-programs. Anytime I was doing that, it was keeping us, giving us a little bit of a buffer there, a little bit of an insurance program as far as if it was dry, I was still holding off things with that dicamba because it's higher in water solubility, but it also doesn't take as much water to activate. It can give us some residual activity to kind of hold off some of those broadleaf species before they pop up and we don't get that activation on our residual side. So throwing dicamba in was helping. Another thing to consider is if we do see a dry period coming up, like I said, with the solubility of some of these different products. Warrant is one that it takes some water to activate, but it also tends to hang around a little longer. So it might not catch things that are those first emergings if we don't get that early activation, whereas some other products like Outlook, we might look at those a little bit in some of those situations, especially later in the summer if we don't have dicamba to throw in with those residuals and we're still wanting that residual to catch with lower rainfall amounts. That's when I've kind of swapped over to looking at, do we throw a product like Outlook in, which is dimethenamide. It's not our product, but it's lower water solubility. So keeping in mind that these different residual products have different water solubilities, they activate at different times. What I like doing is having dicamba to throw in to kind of help buffer us. Metribuzin is also another active ingredient that I like for water hemp, as far as it doesn't take as much water to activate as some of the other active ingredients that we look out there. A really good example in a lot of our demo work this year is if I had a program where I'm utilizing a product like Valor with flumioxazin in it, needs water to activate that. If I ran that pre-program like a Valor XLT with no dicamba in it, and I had a Liberty post program, if I didn't get that initial activation, I had so many breaks by the time I'd come back with Liberty, I was missing those plants because they were too large. The same goes for if I went in and added the dicamba, I wasn't dealing with those large plants. I was able to keep that plot clean. So really that was the biggest difference we were really seeing this year, is those different active ingredients we threw into the pre really affected how successful we were with posts. Another thing that was affecting us a lot this year on our post side, especially with the use of Liberty, was those lower humidity days. Some things that we can do to kind of mitigate that, we like to spray when there's a little bit more humidity, especially with the Liberty product that's contact, and we don't want all of it evaporating really early. So looking at throwing things in, like making sure we had the higher gallons per acre out there, was helping quite a bit. Even considering adding some oils, things that might help that product from evaporating, always making sure we had AMS out there. Those things all kind of played into it, but really weed size and how well that pre worked were usually the determining factor on how well we could take out that water hemp there on that post pass. Um, the other thing we also ran into was the debate of, is it worth throwing a residual out in your post program if you're not seeing much rain coming in the next week or so? My answer to that was always yes, because even if we didn't get the initial activation, the burn down product you had with it usually took out what was there. What we're hoping is that we get some of that activation, that residual. That way it can kind of help our crop out if we don't reach full canopy or it's taking a little bit of time to get to canopy. Products like Warrant being encapsulated can kind of hang out a little longer out there before they get that activation, not completely be degraded. So those are things I want guys to consider, is one, the solubility of your product and making sure that we're putting enough modes of action in the pre to kind of cover us for that activation side. And with dicamba as a possibility to add in, I've really liked that, is kind of giving us a little bit of insurance there up front.